Welcome, everybody. This episode today is going to be a great one because I think we can all agree that we'd like our salespeople to spend more time client-facing, because this is really where they can do a lot of the hard work of consulting customers, advising them on the value and proving to them the value of our solutions in order for them to purchase them. And this is, really where there is some challenges. But, research is really showing that a lot of these opportunities that we have are huge. We have too much time going towards things that are not customer facing. And today's Go-to-Market Innovators guest is going to detail this problem and what needs to change so that sellers can get back on their game, providing the optimal value to their customers. So today I'm really excited to be joined by Ryan Longfield. He's served as the CRO at Gong for the past 5 years until recently shifting into the company's Chief Innovation Officer role. Before that, he had an amazing run at LinkedIn, holding a number of sales leadership roles. He joined the company actually before they were public. So they were startup phase in 2009, riding for 10 years before joining Gong, and including a heck of an IPO and acquisition by Microsoft for $26.2 billion. As a fellow LinkedIn alum, always great to see familiar faces. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So in our recent conversations, you mentioned a stat that just really jumps out and is incredibly top of mind for revenue leaders especially, but I think the CMOs and CROs alike that listen in are going to be interested in this. This is a stat that is driving the way you think about your strategy within your own team and as a platform for Gong's go-to-market in your solutions. Can you let us in on that stat and why it's making such an impact for you and for Gong overall?
Sure, absolutely. So the stat is that 77% of a rep's time is spent in non-selling activities. And, I love sales. I hire salespeople. I lead salespeople. It's my passion. Salespeople are paid well. We all know that. And generally salespeople are paid well because it's this beautiful role that is the art and science of human influence. And it's really tough. You're carrying a number and you're going out there and you're influencing customers customers and prospects if you're doing it right. And a lot of that influence needs to be actually out being influential, right? I mean, yes, you need to prep for meetings. Yes, you need to send influential emails, et cetera, but the primary place of influence is when you're out in front of your customers, whether that be over video or phone or in person. And to think that only 23% of time, less than a quarter of that, is actually client facing, I think we all would agree that there's a tremendous opportunity there. So that's the stat. If you Salesforce, so that was a stat by Forrester. If you break that down, Salesforce actually released a report recently. It's called Trends in Sales Ops, I think is Trends in Rev Ops or Sales Ops. And it was released this year. And they do a breakdown of how reps are spending their time. And so as we unpack that problem, I think that breakdown becomes really relevant and important to understand, okay, well, look, that's overwhelmingly not client facing. What are the areas that I could optimize in order to make sure that my people are doing more of the things that I pay them so much money to do? And so we can break down those time allocations if interesting.
Yeah, let's do that, because I think one of the things you're alluding to is really important, because we've got to start somewhere. And I think we'll get into this a little bit. You had mentioned to me before that, 77% non-selling activities.
Yeah.
That is never going to be 0%.
Yeah.
But the goal is to get as close as possible. There are important internal things that you have to do. There are important things that you have to do outside of direct client facing. But let's talk a little bit about how do you get as close to zero as possible, to your point, to let those sellers really sell, build trust, build rapport. How do you see this being improved? And
Yeah.
do you have ways that you're creating time for your sellers, for your customer facing teams that our audience could learn from?
Yeah. So I totally agree with that in terms of some areas you're going to want to be zero and other areas you're not going to want to be zero. But it's certainly the goal is not to get 100% of the time customer facing. Is a very easy example of that is I believe that the quality of a sales meeting is directly connected to how much time is spent in preparation for such meeting. And maybe not actually, I'm going to adjust that, not how much time, but how well prepared the individual is. And I think there's a big distinction there because I would still want that person to be prepared. But if I could take the 9% of time, and this is the real breakdown, almost 10% of the time that a rep is spending in their holistic job preparing for meetings, that's a big piece of the pie. If I could keep them at the same level of preparation or more prepared, but I could cut that time in half all day long, right? And that's the effort. That's the effort for us as leaders, is to go through the various categories and say, okay, so 9% in meeting prep. What can I do to make that 5%, but have their preparation level not drop, or have it even go farther? 9% manually updating systems. That's one I would like to go to zero, actually. We are in this amazing time that we're going to talk more about, which is like this technology explosion of innovation, and specifically that focused at our client facing teams and our go-to-market teams. I would love for there to be an autonomous CRM and autonomous systems. And I think for far too long, our systems have required our people to do so much work for them, but those systems have done almost no work for our people. And I love that we're in a time right now where that's all shifting. That is shifting and shifting fast. That there's this consumer mentality to technology, even B2B technologies or the enterprise technologies that are requiring us to have a better user experience. And so I think that dynamic is dramatically shifting. But that's one, manually updating systems. I want that at zero. And so I think it really does depend on the category we're talking about. But I think the right approach for us as leaders is to go through and break that down and go, okay, manually updating systems, we're not there yet, but I'd love that at zero. Meeting preparation, it's at 9%. What could I do in order to innovate or improve our operations where that 9% becomes less? Another one is 9% prioritizing their leads and opportunities, determining what the next best action is based off those leads, right? So an example of this obviously is like at Gong, we love, for example, using the G2 signals. If somebody's on G2 researching our space or a competitor or us, does that information inform the prioritization of my team and their outreach? Absolutely. I want that signal going right to my team in that moment so that they can do that. And I can take that 9% that we just talked about and using technology, shrink that down and make them far more effective. With each of these buckets of areas, we can do better with, again, operations, internal collaboration. And then the thing I'm most passionate about, especially given my new role, is the technology portion of that. But those are some examples.
Yeah, and you've said before, you've made the analogy to like marketing and where they're on their journey, right? Marketing has been using tech for a long time,
Yeah.
probably far longer than the revenue organizations have. Um, and they're still getting it right. They're still tinkering with it. Many of the examples you just shared, especially that last one, like lead flows, prioritizing leads, determining what to do with those leads, that's like right in the wheelhouse of what we talk about a ton. Is like there's got to be a great internal partnership there. And so I'd love to kind of dig in on the role marketing can play, and then let's definitely double back to the role of tech, because I think you've found in your time at Gong, and especially all the conversations over the last few months, that like this is early innings baseball
Yeah.
for the rev orgs right now on tech adoption and really getting it right. But let's go with that marketing side. What role can marketing play in helping give sales and the customer facing teams a lot more time back to focus on the selling activities?
Yeah. I would say some of the biggest areas of thrash that I have ever experienced in my leadership role, which is saying something because there's oftentimes a lot of thrash in the stuff that we do, has been in the connection of kind of lead generation to sales qualified opportunity, MQL
Mhm.
transitions to SQL. Like it's why this podcast exists, probably in large part, right? And if you look at if you connect it to the topic that we were just talking about, in terms of the time spent even from reps on this topic, 20% of time is spent on researching prospects and doing the prospecting. 27%, that's a huge portion of the pie. And so to call it out, like, one area, huge portion of opportunity, two, ripe with opportunity because there's so much thrash. And it's really where the two seams of the organizations come together and are stitched together. And so, I think that the first piece, I'll go to tooling second, but I'd say the first piece is operating as a single unit.
Mhm.
And I'm sure on this show you've highlighted and talked to many folks in my role and in others about the importance of operating as a single unit between the two orgs. It feels so easy to talk about. It feels so hard to pull off. So I'll actually give you a couple of very practical suggestions as to how you can do this well. The first one I'd say is that there are very easy kind of metrics and definitions that you can, and how things are going. So status updates, like, these are areas where you can build things together. And I'm constantly blown away when I find out that marketing metrics have been built by marketing and sales metrics have been built by sales. And marketing's view on how we're doing in terms of success in this area of, again, like demand gen, lead gen, qualified opportunities, um, you know, they're building their version of success and how we're doing state of the union, and you're building yours. It's like if you eliminated all that stuff and you built all of that together, then I think you're having all the good hard conversations that you need to have in order to operate as a unit. um you know that that's where the magic happens. I mean, a great marriage, as an example of like the pinnacle of operating as a single unit, you're having conflict all the time, right? You're like working things out. And when this happened, I didn't appreciate that. And like, how do we want to do this? And setting goals and adjusting on the fly. I mean, it's the same thing with a marriage and between sales and marketing. If you want to operate as a unit, you got to build all that stuff together. So build your ICP together and the definitions there, build your success metrics and your definitions there. How are you how are you doing, and why? Build that together and report on that together. So I'd say that's a huge one, asking the hard questions. And then the last piece of kind of just no blame, limited, I'll say limited ego, not no ego, because we all have some ego. But we had an amazing demand gen leader named Russell Benzon at Gong. And when we were short a sales dev leader and things were not converting as well
Mhm.
accordingly, he was the first to throw his hand in the air and say, "Hey, I'll do that job in addition to my day job, just in the interim." And that's like fully operating as a unit. That's not, he could just be blaming and saying conversion rates are down. Instead, he's like, "Let me double my workload and get in there and get it done." So I think, yeah, that's, operating as a single unit, but really having the hard conversations, building together. That would be the first starting point for sure.
Yeah, I love that because the mantra, it resonates. No blame, limited ego. I agree. Actually, having a little bit of ego is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
You want that drive, you want that ambition, but you also have to have some checks and balances. So kudos to Russell for jumping in and just helping the whole system operate exceptionally well.
Yeah.
You mentioned the second big one for you guys was the tooling aspect. And you gave one example earlier, shout out G2, that appreciate that. But could you elaborate a little bit more on, how are you using tooling from a marketing perspective to be able to take stuff off of the sales team's plates? And to your point, like, take 9% and get it to 5%,
Yeah.
2%, 1%.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd say there's a couple of angles at this one. So we just said there's 27% of time spent both kind of prioritizing leads and organizing your prospects and finding the right contact information and all that stuff. And then there's actually the prospecting that goes on with it. And I think that tooling has an incredible opportunity in both of these areas, or all of these areas. And so I think if you literally went side by side with the folks doing the job and you said, like, okay, how does it look like for you to do all this stuff? You'd be like, wait, that's how that's how this is working. And I think if you take the like really antiquated version where you get a phone book or you get a pile of leads and it's like you just go through one by one, I think historically, in kind of a crazy way, oftentimes there's like the whole inbound side of things over here, and marketing's kind of doing a bunch there. And then oftentimes there's like the outbound side of things over here. And the outbound version, oftentimes in a lot of organizations, looks the way it did when you had a stack of cards. It's just a stack of cards that are in a CRM, and you're kind of picking through one by one. But there's so much room for innovation in that, in the sense that what you really need is you need AI out there scanning all of the different data inputs that you can get from all of the different marketing assets that are out there in the world. And like marketing done well puts a huge blanket out there into the world and then gains signal from it. And that signal is so wildly valuable to determine what next action is. And so you put a website out there, anybody in the world can see it, but who's actually coming to the website? And did they actually just click something that's a download that then means you should call them right now? Or is somebody, like I said before, on G2 researching your competition? Wow, that would be a great time where they're in the mindset to go and influence them. And so it's almost like restacking the cards, so to speak, from highest to least in terms of propensity to respond. And that is the ultimate force multiplier. I mean, that is the ultimate point of leverage, right? Because so much time is spent calling voicemail, hang up, calling, don't get somebody, calling, getting somebody, they're not interested because they're doing something else. So the more you can get the propensity signal right, the dramatically more efficient your sales team is going to be in those outreaches, both in terms of the preparation for outreach and the outreach themselves. So I think those are some obvious low-hanging fruits to get after when you're talking about this sort of thing.
Yeah, I really liked the way you said it about marketing being that blanket, creating those signals. I think it really, to me, does reinforce your core point, which is the rev orgs in partnership with marketing really have to up their game on tech.
Yes.
And use even more progressive tech that is stuff they have not used. AI being the topic of the day and will be the topic of the decade. So let's get into the role tech plays a little bit more and hopefully unpack a couple of very specific ideas that you've been articulating around. How do we even further minimize, right? So if we think about the technology and where the gains are to be had, you alluded to autonomous CRM, right? If you're creating a blanket and even just the website, it's a great example. Just knowing who's on your website, who's engaging, who to reach out to when,
Yeah.
that idea of like all these signals coming together to inform next best action and prep and follow up. It's like, it is incredibly powerful and exciting. So when you think about the role tech's going to play, maybe
Yeah.
let's start with that autonomous CRM idea and then go from there to how you see ChatGPT, Bard, those other externals helping on research and a few others that you've been advocating for.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the time we're in right now, because I think that AI has been the ultimate hype cycle, right? It's been so overpromised and largely under-delivered so far. And I think that the reason why here's a crazy stat. Goldman put out a study that said $200 billion worth of investment will have gone and will be going into AI tech projects by 2025. That is a massive number, 200 billion. And I think that we're in a really crazy time because there's a financial engine through the venture world and through the private equity world and through other mechanisms that is like this huge funnel of cash into software innovation and right now into AI technologies. that has never existed before in the magnitude that exists today.
Mm.
And so, this is a time where you have big problems like the ones we're talking about with, huge productivity opportunities, we'll call them. And then you have this huge influx, and you have a technology that's just blossoming. And I think the last piece is what's coming together right now is, I think ChatGPT was so powerful because it took a concept of AI that felt elusive and nobody could actually ever access, and then it made feel tangible for the first time. It was like, oh, the promise of AI, that's cool, and I can go play with it right now, and it's almost all that I wanted it to be. It's incredible. And so generative AI just exploded and has got us all now leaning in. And so I think it's actually coming together right now as we speak, right? So we talked about 9% of research, 9% of time being done on researching accounts before you go in. I'm meeting with a big customer tomorrow, and I went into Google Bard and I said, hey, show me all the news from their financial reports as well as external news sources that would um, connect to these three value propositions. And I put in our value propositions. And Bard went out there and did all the heavy lifting for me and delivered something back that like pulled from all those sources and said, here's this, here's that, here's this. And then you can say, show me the links for such, et cetera, if you want the original source. Like that's taking something that literally would have taken me 2 hours to do something like that, to read through their 10K or 10Q, to read through all the news sources of late, to scan it for all the things that we care about specifically. It's done in, a minute. So that's a great example of using a tech that exists today, how you can, dramatically decrease that one. I think there's other ones, which is like, the manual updating of systems. And you talked about the autonomous CRM previously. I mean, I'll tell you what I think. This is kind of getting almost like philosophical or out there, but the thing that I think AI is doing that's really amazing right now is we as business leaders have all gotten this influx of data, right? So now everything's digital, so you can capture it. So the digital becomes the data. And then you're overwhelmed with how much data there is, right? There's so much data. And the hard part now is organizing it in a way that you can make decisions off of it. Well, I think the place where AI comes in is that it actually is a great organizer of tremendous amounts of data in a way that moves data into insight, right? Data is 9% of manually updated systems. Like it's just the fact that is what happened. The insight is the so what. It's like, what do I do about it? How do I move? What implications does that have on action? And AI is the transition point between data and insight. And so it's solving this big problem that we have of like all this information that we don't know how to access. Going back to the CRM, if you think about that, I think the CRM is the classic example of this big storehouse of data. But when's the last time the CRM gave me any insight whatsoever in terms of next best action? Like not in my 2 decades of doing this. And so when you talk about what the CRM should be, it should be a system that's smart enough to then give you next best action. It should be a system that's smart enough to take in all of these information points as a hub and then spit out the next best action and coordinate the organization around it. So I think that is the future of where I hope the CRM is going. And I think it's where the CRM should be. And it would automatically give you meeting summaries. It would automatically give you next steps. It would automatically help you craft communications. It automatically update the contacts rather than sitting there going like, oh, that email bounced. Like, that's not a good contact. Like, what in the hell? What century are we living in that we're still doing that, right? So there's some big low hanging fruit here. So I'll get off my soapbox and I'll breathe for a second while you
No, I love it. I'm with you 100% because you just think if all the different systems, right? If a core CRM is plugging into Gong and other really smart systems as well, this is all part of that blanket. All different ways we're collecting that data. It does have to start becoming a little bit more autonomous. And I would love the idea of remove this friction, remove this manual input. And then you just think about how that can transpire into now it's not just empowering the rep that's in the seat right now.
Yeah.
Also insights to leadership and it's also insights to the person that rotates in next.
Yep.
Right. So that person gets promoted, moves on to a great new opportunity. Somebody else comes in. The system should be helping educate that person on what's been going on, what's next, what should you be doing.
Absolutely.
There's real limitless potential. We could spend a lot more time talking about that, but we do have to pivot towards final advice. Always love to give guests one last piece of insight to share with everybody. So, Ryan, from your vantage point, what would be that thing you want to leave all of our listeners with?
Well, I'll go with the one that feels in connection with everything that we've been talking about. I think that we've been in a place where this whole promise of AI is largely hollow. We're not in that place anymore. And there are some very easy, low-hanging fruit, out there to go and grab and utilize. And I would say that for us as modern go-to-market leaders, getting super educated on what's going on with advanced tech and how it plugs into your world and changes your world. How will it change your job description? How will it change the things that reps need to be great at and what they don't need to be great at anymore? Educating yourself on the latest and greatest out there. It is a big and expanding world of interesting technologies that are really good at solving problems. And I think it's incumbent upon us to evolve with the times. I think there's like this whole idea as to like what jobs will be automated away. And, I think that that's going farther in our world than I'm ready to speak to today anyway. But I think that the way it's going to push us as leaders, maybe it doesn't replace the job, but you're expired because you haven't engaged this massive new, I won't even call it a trend, because it's going to change the way that we do work. And if you're not able to evolve and change the way that you're doing work, utilizing these technologies and getting the most out of them, we're going to be dinosaurs. And so I'd say now is the time to really lean in and get educated and start to follow the people that you believe are experts in this area and watch videos and, geek out on this stuff and make sure that you're on the cutting edge, you're able to utilize it. So that would be my charge, given the times we're in and given what we talked about.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Ryan. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and helping give us some practical advice on where folks should be thinking about driving productivity gains. Thank you for joining us, and everybody have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thanks, Mike.